waving on the front.
Settle down. All right. And let me know when we're ready. We're live. JT.
The Last Dragonrider is a cinematic rail shooter. You will be set riding on a dragon in a massive world fighting off an army of mechanical conquerors. We have 4 major goals for this game. We want it to feel like you're in a huge world. Everything takes place on a massive scale. Airships you're fighting are giant. The buildings, everything is really big. Everything lives on a massive scale. It's not about the micro, it's about the macro. The second main point we want to have is we want it to be non-stop action. After the introduction, we just want the player to be able to play the entire game, stopping. So we want to tell a lot of the story through the environment and things that are occurring around you, as well as the things that you're directly interacting with. The third major point is we want it to feel cinematic, which kind of gives it non-stop action. We want it to look like you're playing a movie. It should be an act. The main character is on a dragon. You're fighting giant mechanical machines. It's kind of already set up like a high-budget movie, and I'll get into how we want to convey information like HUD and then later slide. And then the fourth part is that we want the story to feel complete. In this 20 minutes of gameplay, we want to have a character introduction. We want to have a climax and a resolution. Everything should feel complete. It shouldn't feel like there's loose ends to tie up. So that brings us to Dragon Track. So you play the character Kalema, who is a warrior in this clan of dragon people. They live side by side with dragons. They are really in touch with nature, and they kind of get their magic energy from nature. And the dragons from these different tribes kind of represent different parts of nature. So the tribe she's from is from the Storm tribe, and the dragons kind of represent the spiritual essence of storms. So they kind of have power over lightning and water, and she out their machines by using water. So the main characters, there's really only 3 main characters of the game. There's Kalema, the warrior. You play as her. She's bonded with her dragon. And then the captain's going to be the villain. She's going to be cold-hearted just like the rest of her crew, and she'll be aboard this really large airship that will be the final battle of the game. Their diet, we wanted them to feel completely like different characters. Kalema is obviously from a tribe. She's kind of more this aristocrat, kind of evil empress kind of feel. And also, the Kalema art, by the way, is also that Karen drew for us. And we wanted to kind of show this as our kind of our art style we're kind of going for. It's going to be like exaggerated proportions, like her limbs are going to be longer than normal. And we're using like the Clone Wars from Star Wars cartoon show as kind of a reference point of how they have like a really sharp cinematic kind of style, and it looks like a cartoon, but it's really like crisp and well done. So we're gonna kind of aim sort of towards that art style. And then Dragon, which was drawn by Raya, looks great. We wanted to kind of have him be sort of a mix of organic, inorganic. So he's like rock, water, plants, to represent that connection with nature. Okay. So the captain is in charge of all these enemy airships that you'll be fighting. The airships can attack you with fireballs, flamethrowers, different kinds of projectiles like that. And your job is going to be to navigate around them shots can, dissolve the fire. And then there's going to be 2 other attacks that we plan on having that are not directly damage related. So one of them is going to be kind of a grappling hook style anchor they'll shoot at you. That'll, if it hits the dragon, it'll kind of latch on and Kalema will have to run over and kind of throw it off. Or they'll try to capture you. And the second one's kind of another capture method, which they'll shoot a net at Kalema, capturing her, knocking her off the dragon, she'll have to cut herself free, and then the dragon will swoop up and grab her at the last second. And how do you fight back? And you fight back with dragons, of course. So the dragon is powered by water, as mentioned before. That's going to be your main attack. You shoot kind of like water bullets at the enemies. You're going to be aiming for their engines, which will be visible on all the airships. You'll want to be putting the fire out so they'll crash. It's not going to be based around fighting individual soldiers on the ships. It's going to be more about taking the actual whole airship out. And then another attack they'll have is when they combine together, the dragon will launch Kalema off them, kind of like a harpoon. So she'll hold her spear, kind of get launched off with a wave of water, and we'll have a little can cinematic of her taking out a big airship by, ripping out the gears and the engines. And then he'll swoop by and pick her up. And that'll be kind of like an ultimate attack that will have a quick cooldown period. So it won't be able to be used and spammed all the time, but it'd be kind of cool to have this big cinematic moment to take out a really big ship, like right at the right time. Also, the ability to fly will give us this ability to move the screen differently. So since it is a rail shooter, you're going to be going down this pathway that's the camera automatically follows. The dragon's movements need to feel really tight and controlled, but we don't want it to feel jerky. So he needs to have a little bit of weight behind him. When he turns this direction, he needs to lean into the turns, lean out of the turns, lean up for descending. So, okay. Conveying information, again, with the cinematic style, we want to make sure that it's very minimalistic. We would like to have the health bar basically be shown through the glowiness of the dragon, and other things like that to represent the status of your power-ups and your attacks. So when she's ready to do another harpoon skydiving attack, it'd be great for her to just say like, oh, I'm ready to do that, as opposed to show like a pop-up on the screen, because it becomes video gaming and distracting. So keeping with the cinematic style, we want to cut out as much of the visual as possible. And we will use an aiming reticle so you can actually aim, and any of the other visual cues don't really seem to read with people when we're playtesting. We'll put like the health bar in the aiming reticle and try to put a couple things in that. So we kind of have a plan B. Okay, level progression. The progression goes through this valley, and the valley will be similar to how the PowerPoint is going, where you're moving and navigating to different points automatically, and the player can control just the X and Y movement of the dragon going through these predetermined points. That allows us to make like a really roller coaster style feeling game that's going to be very tightly paced. We'll know exactly where the player's going to be at 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, which helps us with our metrics and testing. And all these points along this hypothetical line, we'll be able to create events along that. So, and events will include enemy spawn points. At certain points, we'll load in enemies, and hopefully they'll be off screen so you don't see them. And then the waves will be determined by how well you've done so far. So we also were talking about this idea of having kind of flexible scaling difficulty. The more enemies you defeat, the more enemies will spawn at the next spawn point. The fewer, the less they'll send. And we're going to justify that with a story point, saying if she's not taking out so many enemies, then they're not going to be sending in like their reserves and their extra part of their army. They're going to spread them out. So we're going to have story events, and the story scenes occur in these path events. And those story scenes are also going to kind of say like, hey, they're destroying more of the village if you didn't stop all the ships so far. If you destroy like 100% of the enemies that you come across, then they'll be saying like, oh, you've saved the village, or whichever part of the city you're helping. And then another big part of the game is going to be the environmental hazards. So flying through this environment, enemies will have scripted events where they'll shoot a building or something, and something will collapse like a tower. And you'll have to fly under it or above it and navigate around kind of the terrain crumbling around you. So we were using references kind of like the escape from the tunnel in Aladdin when he's on the magic carpet kind of navigating around all the pillars and stuff falling down. We kind of want to have situations like that too. So you're going to be fighting enemies, dodging obstacles, and we'll have story events where other Dragon Riders or other characters will fly by and talk to you. And we want to contain all of that in this app. And we don't want to have any kind of transitions between them. We want to cut as many load screens out as possible. Okay, for development, we plan on creating this Valley editor. Programmers will set up something that the producers and some of the other programmers can work on to create these events along this path. We want to make sure that it's very flexible so we can work in chunks. We get this part of the level done, we get this next part. Different people can work on different chunks. And each of these chunks, we can say they're roughly 20 seconds of gameplay. And we polish each chunk before we work on and start implementing the next one. That'll kind of let us gauge our scope for the game, figuring out how long it takes to build each chunk of the level. And the editor we decided to choose is the Havoc Vision Engine. Havoc has shown us from previous Capstone games that you can build really big, beautiful environments like Flushing Night and which have really big, gorgeous environments that were able to be streamed in and out seamlessly. So that's definitely like a big point in Havoc's favor. And also using like the UDK engine, we're gonna have to do kind of like a lot of back-end kind of making it not for a first-person shooter. So it kind of was also kind of became an obvious choice for us to use the Havoc engine. Another big part of development is going to be the sound. Music's going to be a huge part, obviously. We'd like to have the music kind of be a mix of tribal music and symphonic music, because obviously from the tribal group, we want tribal music, and the whole punk army is kind of more European style, so the symphonic music will fit really well with that. So it'll have its own kind of characteristic sound. Voice acting will be important because it is a very heavy story-based game. So having people looking for actors and making sure we have really good voice acting is going to be important. And then probably the most important thing is the sound effects. The Dragon roars have to sound awesome and very original, because in any Dragon media, the Dragon voice has to sound unique but like a dragon. So that's going to be some work getting the dragon to have multiple types of roaring that all kind of sound like it's coming from the same creature. So that's going to be a lot of work on whoever is in charge of audio. And then the scope. Again, it's going to be iterative and flexible. We plan on working on the beginning of the game and the very end of the game, and kind of fill out the in-between part depending on how the progress came with the beginning and end. The beginning and the end have to be really well polished, and we know we're going to have to build those. The in-between part could be 10 minutes long, it could be like 7 minutes long, depending on how long it takes to build each chunk. And that's just the part that can kind of be a little bit more flexible, and doesn't have to be a specific length. So we're going to kind of spiral develop that, and really the scope's really small. It's just one level and one boss fight. Just make this a really polished venture, and we'd like to try to get this done by vertical slice. Pretty much everything is done, just polish, polish, polish. Try to avoid feature creeping, and make a very cinematic experience. And to wrap up 4 questions, Last Dragonrider is a fast-paced action adventure rail shooter where you're flying on a dragon through really big, detailed environments with fighting off enemies and having a really big cinematic experience. So the main goal of the game is to have that cinematic quality and have this really polished masterpiece in your portfolio. So with that, does anybody have any questions?
So I get that you want a big, fast-paced rail shooter and have these awesome detailed environments. Pretty hard. But how do you expect the burden to go out on the artists if you're creating all these like really intricate, detailed environments that the players only can see for maybe a few seconds before it's gone off the screen and it's then passed?
Well, that's actually a really good question. The good thing is that the enemy's rigging, because their ships, will be simpler than making like actual like people-looking creatures that have to move around realistically. So they don't have to spend as much time on the enemies, and also we can kind of fake some of the environment depending on how fast we're moving past it. So we're gonna probably have some slow moments, which we'll have, okay, we need to work on like really detailed here, but some other ones you're gonna fly past, and we can just kind of have it a little faked. And that's gonna be something that we'll have to kind of test and see how fast the dragon actually needs to move before people get getting sick while playing it. So that's gonna be it's gonna be something that we kind of iterate through. But good question, John.
You talked about the game variant. Can you give me some more information on that, particularly what are the high points of the narrative and some motivations that make it?
All right. I definitely, on purpose, did not get detailed into the story because that's something for reproduction. We have a direction that it's a regular story of, there's a lot of stories like Avatar and other movies like that the high-tech civilization comes into nature, they battle it out, the nature eventually wins. We have that as like our premise, and then we definitely want to kind of build throughout this development and through pre-production come up with the details of the story. Like, what's the captain actually like in more details on kind of what's more, yeah?
I was just going to say, to follow up on it, if you would, I'm just trying to find something to latch onto. Could you give me like is it a revenge story? Is it a coming of age story? Like what kind of?
I think it'd follow more of a coming of age story. I mean, it's going to be the one last person kind of standing up for everybody and saving everybody at the end.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it is a little bit done. A lot of games do that, but that's okay. Like, we're trying to tell this big epic heroic story with this one girl saving everybody. So the only way to do that is to kind of tell the sort of coming of age story, and her being the sole hero. And the details on how that all kind of comes about is something we'll kind of work out in pre-production. We had some story ideas hashed out a little bit, like the ending, but things like that can change during development, and I don't really want to stifle the creativity of the group when we get put together. So, yes.
So when she actually jumps onto airships to destroy them, is that going to be like a cutscene that you play?
It's going to be probably more of a canned animation. She's going to do something and maybe just rapidly hit the A button and she'll just keep hitting it. And then after you hit it 10 times, she'll flip on.
So are you going to continue to move through the environment while what's going on? Or
the dragon will fly around. Yeah, it's going to be more like the dragon will fly around. You'll see them flying around, but when they go back, they'll just return to the same position they were at.
Okay, they continue to look.
Mm-hmm. So it won't break these things. Yes, Ron?
So the games will be shooting water to hit engines, pressing a button to launch around the ship, and after pressing the button to disable it. Are there any other mechanics of that region?
There's a few other attacks, we're coming up with different varieties of just shooting water and different variations of it. And that'll be something we kind of want to hammer out while we're iterating on it, because we don't want to add a bunch of attacks that there's another attack that does the same thing. So that's going to be something that we want to make sure the flying is done correctly, feels good. Okay, shooting feels good. Before adding here's a laundry list of stuff, let's get it all thrown in, and then have to do the same thing. So I think that'll be something we'll probably come up with, maybe a few more attacks that the dragon will have during the production, and then we'll kind of probably pick out the best 3 or 4, and then just polish those. Yes?
Why would somebody want to play this game over Panzer Dragon or
Okay. Well, this is going to be it's a shorter experience. So, I mean, you can get through the whole thing pretty quick. Hopefully the graphics will be more up to date. And, it does have a different setting. Panzer Dragon kind of has this almost like a sci-fi fantasy setting. This is definitely more tribal and industrial. So we're going to have our own kind of take on the story. And it is pretty similar to a lot of other rail shooters, but we're focusing on the cinematic aspect in the story, which is something we'll hack out during pre-prep. Yes, Tom?
Yeah, too. How long in experience based on are you planning based on the scope you presented, and how are you planning on being able to encourage additional playability multiple times? Like once you beat it, will there be? How are you planning on making it? Encouraging replayability.
Replayability was not a major factor in the consideration of this game. I designed this team originally with the idea of it's going to be a portfolio piece, and then somebody that's going to be looking like a scout hiring you or you're applying for a job, they're not going to be redoing it a bunch of times. You want to wow them the first time and just grab them right at the start, and that's how you're going to do your job. And most of the time, people aren't going to be like picking this game up a bunch of times and playing it. Most people are going to walk by, kind of, like window shopping. And if you want a really strong portfolio piece, you want something that just grabs them right at the start. Maybe not. It does lack a little bit of depth in that aspect, but if the experience is really tight, really really polished, then you're going to nail that job. What was your first question?
No, you how much gameplay were you actually going to do? But you kind of answered it the second way. But thank you.
All right, thanks. Yes.
You mentioned waves, and you also showed some really big airships. I would assume they're not going to be one-hit kills, so how would you actually do a wave with big airships?
It's going to be more that we might send it. We want different sized airships. We want some small ones that are faster and some bigger ones that take more hits. And that's going to be something we're going to have to nail. Like, okay, we're going to have 5 different kinds of airships. They're going to be these sizes, and they're going to act in this kind of way. So waves can't be made up of 5 really big ones or 10 really big ones. So we're going to have to kind of hack that out a little bit. But that's something that if the editor, after that's built, that should be pretty easy to test and be like, okay, there's just too much on the screen right now, and that'll be something we'll work on.
Like that.
Yes. Yeah.
The main mechanic is shooting the engines of the airships with water to make them fall. But when I think of a rail shooter, I think of planes flying towards each other with their fronts. Like the engines located in the front, or can you somehow sneak around behind the...
They're going to be in the front. Like, they're going to be really big and obvious, and that'll also kind of give them the signature, fire and below. You'll see their engines. I mean, that's what you have to hit. So Jacob, do you have?
You said you wanted to skip cuts and stuff like that, and as an on-time activity, how can you look at these? Like, is that the dialogue between the sub-level? And if that, then why not do that?
It'd be really cool if we could do it like, I'll just reference Star Fox, where, while you're flying and maybe fighting with 1 or 2 enemies, another character will come up and they'll be talking to you while you're doing some stuff. So it still feels like you're in the middle of this giant war, because whenever you play a game, you just kind of go to a spot, it stops, you're watching a scene. You kind of get stuck out of the moment a little bit. So we want to keep, maybe during the story moments, not give them as much stuff coming at them, so they can kind of focus on what they're talking about, but they're still engaged and still doing something. So I'm assuming during the story scenes, we're not going to have a ton of obstacles and enemies, but definitely some to keep them kind of engaged. But that's a good question. One more? Yes?
You mentioned developing a value editor. What advantages does that provide you over using something that's already built like DBK and they're powerful and everything?
Programmer.
Actually, well, the Division engine, we wouldn't have to have a separate value editor. We just have to make sure everyone knows to use the Division engine properly so that they can use it in that game.
I know there's a couple questions, but I just want to give a shout out to the person who made the presentation. That's pretty cool.
Thank you.